Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Paul Buhr of D-Viroqua is a Democratic candidate for the 96th Assembly District. Paul, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me.
You list some of your important issues. Number one, rebuild roads and bridges. That speaks to the impasse, the gridlock in the Capitol, about how we pay for highways and bridges. How would you pay for highways and bridges?
Well, for one thing, I think we have started some big projects, borrowed money for big projects, got ourselves into a situation now where over 20% of our collected tax revenue goes to service debt. That's only going to get worse, especially if interest rates rise. And it's an untenable situation. So we've got to pay down that debt, that credit card debt, and because roads are something everyone needs. And to think that it doesn't cost you money to have bad roads, your tires, your suspension, your expensive vehicles these days, and your back. Those take a toll on your pocketbook just as much as a gas tax.
Well, what about that gas tax? Could you vote to raise it, or the registration fee, or there's a buzz in the Capitol about tolling? Sorry to interrupt you, but what about those three issues?
Tolling is a poor answer for our highways that are not designed for toll roads. People would easily find routes around them, and 25% of that money ends up in overhead costs. It's a poor solution. By using a gas tax, it seems the logical thing.
How many
I'll
pennies?
have to see the number.
How many pennies would you go up?
Can't tell you.
Okay.
I got to see the numbers.
I understand. Let's talk about healthcare in rural areas. Rural areas, as you're aware, living where you do, older demographic, young people leaving, household income not as high as the statewide average, more and more health care paid for by Medicare, Medicaid. Thoughts on preserving, potentially improving rural health care?
Well, we're lucky in my district. We have 3 excellent hospitals, and they are all critical care hospitals. So we have a little better funding than a non-critical care hospital in our area. The threat is that they lose that critical care classification, but that's a federal issue.
Yeah.
So, but the bigger problem is people's access to affordable health insurance. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'd like to take a shot at getting a buy-in on our Badger Care.
Badger Care. Do you think the state government has a role in retaining and recruiting nurses, physicians, and other healthcare professionals?
Yes, I think it's the state's responsibility to make sure that every citizen in the state of Wisconsin has access to health care.
Okay.
Access.
Local governments have been living with levy limits which hold down property taxes since 2006. Local officials, some of them, say this is really hurting their ability to provide local services. Is it time to loosen levy limits, or repeal them, or keep them?
The issue basically is local control.
Yes.
In the last 6-8 years, we've lost a lot of local control. And as I talk to public servants that work in serving us, they are restricted by their budgets and they're asked to do more with less. I think that the government that is closest to the people is the best government. And if I'm an official and I ask for a levy limit, I know I'm going to have to go to the grocery store and see my neighbor there. And if it isn't warranted, they'll be voted out. And so I think it's up to each community to decide who they are and what they do.
With the tragic incidents of school shootings and mass shootings, Las Vegas, for example. Do we need to change Wisconsin gun laws, sir?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, we'd start with universal
background checks?
Background checks.
Okay.
And after that, we'd have to use some common sense in figuring out what will reduce guns getting into the hands of the wrong people, and maybe some gun technology that needs to be eliminated.
Should Wisconsin bar the sale of assault weapons, the AR-15s, for example?
I would consider it if that came up.
The current state budget does increase state aid for K-12 public schools. Do you think, though, that we still need to increase even more state aid to public schools? Is that a priority for you?
Well, they increased it after they decreased it quite a bit more than that. And given the fact that they have a levy limit, that they have to go to referendum to raise their levy, it seems it's impossible in a modern society to, with more problems that they're dealing with students and higher priced everything else, it's impossible to go forward without increasing the budget. And somehow, especially in our rural area, the rural funding formula isn't fair to us.
Okay.
And I think that every child in Wisconsin needs a quality education no matter what the zip code. And that should be our commitment.
If there was a need to raise more money, more state aid for public schools, any ideas on where you would look to raise that additional revenue?
I think that one thing that I feel is very unfair is in a policy that was developed to benefit our farmers, the land use taxation. We forgot about an unintended consequence, and that was that outside investors can come in and buy farmland and pay a reduced rate of taxes on that land. In my county, we have every piece of land, we have investors from New York and wherever coming by to look at those that land. And in some counties, 50% of the land now, farmland, is owned by investors. Why they should get a tax break? And because they don't care if I have roads or schools, and we need to adjust that to make sure we aren't giving outside investors a tax break that have no vested interest in our state.
Now, you're a dairy farmer. You got a pretty small herd. Your milk price, the prices you're getting for milk are below, as you said, the cost of production. Can state government do anything to help small dairy farmers like you? Or, given the talk about tariffs and all this, is it such an international issue? What help could state government give small dairy farmers like you?
Well, it's I don't think that there's much that the state government can do.
Okay.
It's more of a federal issue, federal policy. But what I see, what the state government can do for small farmers is they can institute value-added grants to explore value-added agriculture.
Okay.
We, in our county, due to the Wisconsin idea, we had our county agent started a grape growing industry that has evolved into wine. Now we have 20 wineries, about 20 wineries, and that has helped in a tourism industry.
Oh.
And that's the Wisconsin idea. But because of local control restrictions, we had been without a county agent for the last 3 years. They wouldn't let us hire one.
A big issue in the next budget is prison funding. The Waupun and Green Bay prisons were built in the 1800s. We're going to close the 2 juvenile prisons. Do we need a new state prison, Paul?
No.
Why?
The trend in the United States, in liberal and conservative states, is to close prisons and reduce prison population. We spend more on prisons in this state than we do on the university system. We need to re-examine our standards of how long we imprison people and do more to reintroduce them to society and get them out of jail.
You mentioned the UW system. We've had a freeze on resident undergrad tuition for 6 years. Should that freeze continue for a 7th and 8th year?
I think the underlying problem is the student loan crisis, that I'll call it a crisis, that we have because students incur so much debt when they go to school, and they have a payment when they come out of college now that is like a house payment. And so that really hurts my rural area because we don't have the jobs that will pay enough to service that debt. So I think we need to find a program that at least allows them to refinance their student debt at market rates.
Okay. If you were in the assembly, would you have voted for the package of tax breaks and tax incentives for Foxconn?
No.
Why?
They called it an investment in Wisconsin. And if that's an investment, it's got a 30-year payback projection, and that's if everything turns out the way we think it will. That's a poor investment because that doesn't figure the opportunity cost of the money. And the other part of it that's a misnomer is Wisconsin. It's not an investment in Wisconsin. It doesn't help my part of the state at all. It's an investment in Racine.
You're a first-time candidate. When you talk to people in the 96th, what surprises you about their concerns? Does anything surprise you? The issues that they bring up, Paul?
No, they really don't. They're all concerned about roads, which is a practical matter. And of course, when I talk to officials, they're resentful of the local control.
They are.
Healthcare always comes up too.
Okay. You have a position on either medical marijuana or legalizing recreational marijuana?
Well, I think medical marijuana is an obvious choice to make at this time. I think, especially in light of the opioid problem, it gives another avenue for pain relief. The recreational marijuana, I think maybe we will have to slowly put our foot in the water on that one. But I think we should the least we should do is take away the felony charge after the second offense, that's possession. That just fills our prisons and labels someone a felon for the rest of his life. Totally unnecessary, way overkill.
A number of bills have passed for what's called the HOPE agenda, dealing with the opioid, methamphetamine, heroin epidemic. Any idea on the next steps maybe the state could take to fight these epidemics?
Well, I think maybe we could hold pharmaceuticals a little responsible for this. Maybe they'd be a little more cautious about pushing their opioids. Mm-hmm. But I think some of the things that we've done are yet to reap results, and the electronic medical records, I think that's going to make physicians aware of the problem, and they won't prescribe them as quickly. And now that they're aware of the problem, I think they're always looking for alternatives. I think just awareness has helped a lot.
Okay, final question. The 96 is an open seat. There's a primary August 15th. You have an opponent. Do you want to talk about differences between you and your opponent, or why you're more qualified?
I have a lifetime of experience, and working with these people in my district, working alongside them, and it's given me the wisdom and the common sense, rural values to be an effective legislator for them.
Paul, thank you. Paul Buhr of D-Viroqua is a Democratic candidate in the 96th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. Paul, thank you very much for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Thank you.